start recording here. We're so grateful to have Rachel Roberts joining us today. I would tell you, like, her book is one of the most interesting constructed books I've seen, and I've seen a lot. It has elements of memoir. It has very much elements of food and recipes, music. It's sort of this kind of almost like an experience of experiencing Rachel. And I think she's really used this book as a way to sort of like put herself as as sort of a sort of a thought leader in this concept of her book, which is really this growing demographic of the American nuns, people who are religiously unaffiliated. And so we got the chance to chat a few weeks back, and I really enjoyed hearing about her thoughts and her thinking behind it. But I think what's important to know about her story and her journey is the book is really part of a broader mission. I think for a lot of us who have those broader missions behind our books, this goal to kind of use the book as a way to create community, push the envelope on things that we're thinking about, galvanize other people behind it. I think her story is one that will resonate with you. And I honestly will tell you, it was fun to read a little bit about her journey. So we'll have her jump on just as she jumped on here, and we'll chat a little bit and share some things about what it's like to do. How are you, Rachel? Great to have you.
Hi, Eric. Thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. We're glad to have you. It's been fun to sort of, read pieces of your book to prepare for this one. Your book really kind of defies sort of, one piece or another. You kind of just like were authentically yourself in it. Why did you decide to kind of go with something that has these sorts of, elements that are uniquely you, and kind of like, how did the decision come to write the book in the way that you did?
That's a great question. And I appreciate that you observed the unique structure of the book. The structure was inspired by my graduate school work. So when I was getting my master's degree in theology from SMU, one of the big projects at the end of the degree program is to write your credo. And this is where you take different topics of what's historically, Christian doctrine, and then you have to basically take a stance on it and defend your position with it. And so the irony of me going to, getting a theology degree is that I found myself in this nun space. And so post-graduate work, I decided to write a full-fledged credo using that same structure, but from the orientation of being a nun.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I wove in some of the personal stories, because when a person makes that journey from being in organized religion to not being, there's a personal story there. And it's just part of the journey. So there's no other authentic way to present it.
You have to be you, right? For sure.
You be you.
Yeah, exactly. You be you. So your story, and maybe I think it would be fun for those who are sort of meeting you for the first time, is to hear that story a little bit. I mean, it's kind of a crazy thing. You grew up in sort of a cult, but also with atheism in your sort of family as well. Like, what was it like to come to this place that you have, and maybe take folks the journey from here I am in this world that seems like it makes sense, but it's sort of also confusing, to I decided to write the sort of final credo on the American nun, the person who is religiously unaffiliated. How the heck did you get here?
Wow. Well, read the book.
Yes.
But firstly, I think it's important to clarify, just for those who are listening, unless you said it before I jumped on, that nun is spelled N-O-N-E.
I did. Yeah. I spelled a few times.
Oh, you did? Okay. I'm sorry. I didn't hear that part.
No, all good. But it is important in this one. It is intentionally ambiguous in some ways to draw attention to it, right?
Yes. Yeah, I like the pun. But to answer your question, I was raised in a Christian cult. It wasn't one of the sexy cults. We didn't sacrifice chickens, and there weren't multiple wives involved or teenage brides. But it was definitely a cult by the academic definition of the term. And that was with my mom and stepdad. My father was an atheist. And they divorced for obvious reasons when I was really young.
Kind of makes sense there.
Yeah, but what was really cool about it is was that as I went into my adulthood, I was able to glean from both of those orientations in life, and I saw good and not so good in both spheres, which ultimately led me to the conclusion that it's not so much the mantle you wear in terms of what you call yourself,
Mm-hmm.
It's more about how we live and how we love.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why for American Nun, when I decided to parlay the book into an organization, that the tagline is "Love is greater than labels."
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, if we're really honest with ourselves, I think most people can admit, I know people who are Christians, atheists, Hindus, this, that, the other, and what they call themselves is not determinant of who they are,
Yeah.
how they treat others, and how they love.
Now you say this in the book, and you talk a little bit about it, is like you're also one of the people who becomes probably the most interesting person at a party, because everyone sort of finds themselves affiliated, and here you are championing this fastest growing sort of affiliation, which is unaffiliation.
Right.
What is it like to sort of be the, kind of the person who's the outsider in some ways? Because I think many people, even if they are religiously unaffiliated or religiously kind of curious about being unaffiliated, they like to fit into groups behind it. And you're sort of notorious for being unfitting in. Like I am notorious, I'm myself. How has that been like to take a stance that maybe is a little unpopular?
Well, that's funny that you say I must be unpopular at parties, because that's how I open my book. I've always sucked at parties because I'm able to immediately drill into like some kind of serious topic, when we're just like sipping on a brew or whatever. But it actually took me decades to reach this. I used to play with, no offense to the men out there, but when I was young, I used to play with the guys at parties and start talking about serious subjects, because they weren't expecting it at a party. But it took me decades to really reach a place of confidence in myself and my own interpretation of life and reality, to stand up and write this book, because literally I was taught the fear of God.
Yeah.
Right. I will smite you. You know what I mean?
Hell is not taught to be a good thing for us young kids when we grow up in the religious faiths. It's not good. It's not going to be a good thing for us.
And it took me decades to reach that place, and to stand up against the institutions, because that's really what it is. It felt like a hand against a tsunami, that I'm going to speak my truth. Well, here's the thing. The reason I had the courage ultimately to do that is because Pew Research came out with a report a few years ago about the fact that this segment of the population is on track to be fully 1/3 of our population right now. And so I realized I wasn't alone. And so somebody had to speak up, and somebody needed to say, let's talk about it. Let's drop our drawers. Let's be honest. And I decided that I had nothing to lose, and there's too much to gain.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Other than maybe losing a few friends that I didn't need to have anyway.
Well, we talk about that a lot actually in this program, of how important it is to not be sort of conventional. And, I'd say like, this is one of those things, to your point about it, it's non-obviously obvious. And that's where I think makes for a lot of great books, is things that are, it's not obvious that the American nun would be this in, 1/3 of our population, but yet when you talk about it, it is obvious. How did you get to the point where you were able to sort of like get up enough courage to basically be that voice? Because I know it's not an easy thing, and you said it took you a long while. Was there a set of things when you started to realize like no one else is basically taking up this mantle, has to be me? How did you get to that point beyond, can it be someone else, and make it you?
The answer to that question, Eric, is a very personal one, and I'm very happy to share it, because if you read the book, I tell a lot of personal stories where it's like no shame. But several years ago, when I was graduating with my degree, realizing that I just spent, tons of hours getting this graduate degree in theology, that I was not going to be a minister or whatever. I was like, now what do I do with it? And at the same time, I was a single mom with 3 kids. I still am, but they're just older now, so it's not quite as crazy. And I felt like I needed resources. I wanted a community that could support me, and that I could have honest conversation with, that I didn't need to pretend that I believed certain doctrines that I knew I really didn't believe. And there weren't those resources. It's like, if you think of it in terms of bookstores, there's tons of new age bookstores, there's tons of Christian bookstores. And but the none space, what that means, it's something completely different. It's a new frontier. And there was a lack of resources. And so that's why I decided somebody's got to put this together, because I felt really vulnerable as a single mom with 3 kids, needing some support. I didn't find it anywhere. And I thought, well, then be the change, you know?
It's got to be. And what I also, when we talked about on the phone a couple weeks back, you discussed how the book in some ways was a way to start a conversation that could build this community behind it. Because I think your point is, and I had an author I told you about named Jillian, who wrote about the fact that a lot of people today who are religiously unaffiliated are also feeling a lot of loneliness and depression, anxiety. And so the book is sort of one part of this one, but you have this bigger mission here to create this new community and connection. What has that been like to have those two parts of it, where the book is supporting the community and the organization and vice versa? How has that been part of your strategy here?
Well, admittedly, I have yet, the fruit of this labor to get the organization going is not fully visible yet. Sure. If you go look at our website, our website right now is very informative. And the social media I'm literally just contracted somebody this week to start launching the social media and really getting it going, because I'm starting a business. It's a business that, at first people were like, are you going to start a nonprofit? And I thought about it, but then I was like, no, because I don't want to be confused with starting a church.
Right.
Church nuns. And so I decided to make it very transparently a for-profit business. And all that really is a legal status, right? Because love is greater than labels. And so I can label it nonprofit or for-profit. What matters is what I do with it. Yeah. So I've been working kind of behind the scenes, putting together the structure of it and fundraising, doing all the entrepreneurial things, which is a whole different hat to have to wear than writing a book or even trying to launch a community. It's being an entrepreneur and fundraising and all that is like, I'm learning a whole nother world. So it's been a little bit slower than we want, but what do they say? It takes 5 years or 10 years to be an overnight success?
I think
it's so exactly. I'm about 3 years in.
It takes at least 10 years, I found, Rachel, at least 10 years. So you got a long way ahead of it. What is, the book itself is sort of this, there's parts of it that are very much like practical, story based, all these things behind it. What is the sort of, you did take this, again, kind of very much it's almost like having a conversation with you. Like when we first talked, I was like, I feel like I've had a conversation by reading the book and then having it. How did you make sure that your voice was heard in? Because I know that for a lot of authors, that's a hard thing to do, to get their voice to really be heard in the book.
Well, I'm glad to know that you perceived it that way. And I have, had people tell me that they felt like they were kind of talking to me when they read the book. And honestly, the tactic I used when I wrote the book was I wrote it for myself. I wrote it like, I need to say what I need to say, period.
Yep.
And I tried not to overthink things. And even like some of my pop culture references are unabashedly skewed towards Gen X, because I am Gen X.
Yeah.
And so I'm like,
there are a lot of things. We connected on that one. I got it. I was there.
Yeah. And I was like, I'm not going to try to force myself to use, 2010 pop culture references when it's not what's really authentically me. Right. And besides, if they don't know who, I Love Lucy is or whatever, then they need to figure that out. So, but, so I think that was really the main thing, is that I decided I'm going to just bare my soul. I told some stories that are pretty embarrassing. And one of the things I really want to see just in general in life is for people to have more candid conversations, because in doing so, we can authentically connect, and then we can really affect more change, that we say we want to see. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And so as you're, the other thing that I thought was interesting is we get a fairly large number of people who have worked on a paper or a dissertation or thesis, and then they decide to turn it into a book. What were some of the things that, were there things that were helpful from the sort of the work that you did in your graduate degree, things that you had to throw away, or things that you did differently in the book? Like, how did you make that transition from, I did this big project here, but it's not really ready for a book yet, into this is something that I can put out as a book?
Well, basically what I learned, and this is just me speaking, and I mean this respectfully, but when I wrote the papers in graduate school, what I realized is that I had learned the vernacular that I needed to regurgitate.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really good at doing that. And
Mm-hmm.
I could make really clever things and construct sentences in ways that, people liked or whatever. But when I finally was honest with myself and realized I'm just kind of regurgitating stuff that I was expected to be heard,
Mm-hmm.
then by the time I reached a place where I could write the book, take the time and write the book, there was no content that I used from that work, because my honesty was in a completely different space.
Mm-hmm.
But the structure, and learning how to make an argument,
Mm-hmm.
and also knowing what the holes were going to be that people would poke at, that was useful. It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like going undercover and
It's funny you say that. You were saying, well, I don't want to step on toes. Actually, what I always tell authors when they have a dissertation or thesis and they're going to turn it into a book is that they will likely have figured out what we call the contribution, kind of the ideas and some of the thinking, stuff like that. But most of the stuff that they'll have to do, about 80 to 85%, they'll have to write. Like, they'll have to do it because, frankly, like there's a reason theses and dissertations are boring. It's because they're not written in a way to be read, right? They're written in a way to show how smart you are to a small number of people versus something to teach those things. So I think your experience is probably more akin to others who've gone through this process of like, yeah, like it helped me realize I care about this topic. It's interesting to me, but it ain't giving you any leg up here on actually writing a book that people will care about.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And so what have you, as you've also been, it's the book comes out kind of in this interesting time here with COVID and with sort of lockdowns and things like that. And I think part of what your message has always been is just the importance of, connecting with people, speaking and things like that. What have you found as ways to get the message out beyond just the book? Like, how has that been playing out for you personally as kind of this, we'll call it your rabble rouser or swashbuckler, I think you're described as in the book at one point. How have you been able to swashbuckle your way to sort of get the message heard by more people beyond just the book?
Again, being a Gen X person, I feel a little fumbly on Instagram, but I have found that there is a micro community on Instagram under a hashtag called deconstruction, where people are deconstructing their Christian beliefs or what they were taught to believe. And now they're kind of shedding the stuff that didn't work and trying to figure out what's valuable to keep.
Mm-hmm.
And I just started finding that I could connect with people through Instagram and just have conversations directly, either through the messaging app, I think they're called DMs, or of course I would migrate it over to email or text as soon as possible. But people were really hungry and ready to have some honest conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, my book falls under the category of deconstruction. And when I wrote it, I didn't even realize, because I wasn't Instagram savvy at the time, I didn't even realize that was a trending hashtag. Mm-hmm. And so it's one of those confluence of elements where, society is all coming to a point where there's this authentic need to have this conversation. So reaching out to people on social media, or they reach out to me. And frankly, since I put the website up, I've gotten quite a bit of people just organically finding the website online. And they've reached out to me, and we haven't even as an organization started to push yet. And so that's right around the corner. So I can't wait to see what's going to happen when we actually are actively pushing the message out there.
That's great. I think that's an interesting insight too for other authors listening to this one, this idea of finding hashtags, because I think that when you are kind of trying to, we'll say in some ways like galvanize an undercurrent, right? Which is, again, I think the American Nun movement is still this kind of undercurrent. Not everyone, I think that a lot of people, if you told them that there was 90 million people, would be like shocked. Like that can't be right. But then when you think about it, they're like, I guess it kind of does make sense, right? So that idea though of like that audience is likely somewhere. And I think what social media has done is allowed us to find them that are not necessarily geographically constrained. Because it's like there's not like a meeting of the American nuns here in like Dallas or DC or whatever it is. Like they're not getting together. But
Right.
this idea of finding where they are is a powerful one. Have you found that like some of that like sort of online community has started to blend offline, or you're seeing that like there are people who are looking to get the nuns together, the NONEs together in sort of in-person environments now?
I think that I have had some people reach out to me that I'm meeting with somebody in person tomorrow, and that we've just connected and happen to live in the same town. And so that I think that will happen, but I think it's a little early thus far. And in fact, even the term nun, even though it's been used by demographers, social scientists, and then certain religious groups that are trying to get them back, it's not quite, it hasn't seeped into the public consciousness yet. And so that's been one of my obstacles, is to get the term out there. And I think it's important because I say that the term nun is the anti-label label.
Right.
And which also dovetails into the greater cultural movements of, don't label my sexual orientation or my gender identity or my political identity, and, that whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that the public is ready for it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just now requires a good publicist. So if anybody knows one,
it's hard, right? And I think the idea of like taking and creating, and it's one of those things why I think when you are tackling a countercultural movement, which you are tackling, right, and others are trying to, is one of those things that it does take time. And in some senses, it almost takes time. And you kind of have to wait for these extrinsic shocks. Like you kind of can't make this thing go faster. Even if there were a great publicist, it's sort of like something else has to happen that will push this thing over the line. So there's a lot of, it's what you're doing is not easy, but it's one of those things like, what's the phrase about luck? It's like when preparation meets opportunity. You got the preparation part. Now we got to have that opportunity.
Right. So now I'm just,
exactly a little bit.
I've been waiting.
What is it like a little bit? I think some authors are sort of hesitant to share things that maybe, it may upset family members. It may upset, people. Like obviously you're coming from this background where you grew up in a Christian cult. You've got this sort of like, family, you went to SMU for your graduate degree. And here you are with this very kind of like in your face message. Not it's pushing in your face, but it is. How did you kind of, again, how did you deal with people that were going to be, haters and sort of negatives and critics behind it? And then B, how did you basically get past that to continue to push on the message?
That is a great question. And that is something that I wrestled with honestly for a couple of years before I actually published the book. And even up to the point where I actually published it, I was still a little, kind of having some hives or whatever in this, mostly about my family.
Right.
Because a good chunk of my family is still quite religious.
Mm-hmm.
But it became kind of like the Clinton era don't ask, don't tell kind of thing, because they know what I'm doing and I know they know what I'm doing, but we really just don't talk about it. And we just focus on connecting in the ways that we can in a loving way. And we just don't go there. But I really had to determine, I drew upon other social movements in previous eras, and I think about the bravery and the courage of the African-American person who went and sat at the counter in the diner to get served, or, the women that fought for women's rights to vote and things like that. And that were definitely counter probably to what some of their family constructs were at the time. I'm like, if those people hadn't had that courage, then I wouldn't be where I am today, for one thing. So I'm indebted to them. But then also it really became a benefit versus risk type of evaluation. And I decided that the cultural benefit was far greater than even if I had to risk losing relationships in my own family. That's how strongly I feel about the need to have authentic conversation about this topic.
It's a hard one, right? And I think to your point about it is, I think that religion is one of those things that it's very difficult because it does have this sense of like, you know, well, you're either with us or against us. And like, you know, there's a lot of things. And I think even as a parent, I'm sure that family pushes on it. I mean, I remember there was a, you know, one of my relatives decided not to baptize their children, and my grandmother was trying to sprinkle holy water on the kids, like at a family reunion. So like those things are like very much long cultural things behind it, but it is one of those things you sort of think about the, you know, the movement, you know, it needs to have a conversation about it for sure.
That's right. And the truth is, what humans are experiencing right now is a completely uncharted territory of what it means to be spiritual
Mm-hmm.
when you believe in science, when you value inclusivity,
Mm-hmm.
when you value results. I can't tell you how many people quit going to church because it didn't make their lives any better.
Right.
Like,
Right.
I would rather be home sleeping for a day, or
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Yeah, someone just commented spiritual versus religious, and that's exactly right. There's so many different constructions of religion that are being, people are shedding because they
Mm-hmm.
don't function in a positive way,
Mm-hmm.
what people really need.
Mm-hmm.
But what's different about nuns is that there is a sense of spirituality, unlike the hardcore new atheism movement of the 20th century that was
Mm-hmm.
very anti-religion.
Interesting. Interesting.
So there's a difference there.
Mm-hmm. And what's the, you know, in terms of that, as you started to think about getting those early people to support you and the book behind it, what was it like to have those early conversations? Because I'm sure when you're starting this one, you know, you have those people, it's sort of a below the radar thing here. It's not like you're talking
Yes.
about it publicly. Like you don't post, most people wouldn't post these things on social media. How do you find people in those circles that are maybe kind of the hidden nuns, as for other people that are looking to find those early kind of evangelists and fans who may support their mission, even if they don't want to be quite as public and vocal about it yet?
You know, I guess because it's a subject matter that I've always cared about pretty much my whole life, I just have a way about having conversation with people and just kind of drawing it out of them. And what I found is that, and I think I mentioned this in the book too, is that even though it's not culturally considered appropriate to discuss religion at parties, for example, or whatever, people actually really want to.
Interesting.
Like, if you can get past the, I gotta look this way and act this way, and you can just really start having just a genuine connection with somebody, people have a lot of great thoughts. And I cannot tell you how many people were relieved to find out, oh, wait a minute, you mean I don't have to believe XY story, you know, was literal? You mean that doesn't have,
Yeah.
oh, wow, you know, and they're relieved. They're like, I've always thought that, but I didn't want to tell anybody, you know, and I'm
Yeah.
like, let's just be honest. I decided that I valued honesty more than I valued institutional tradition.
It's amazing. And I think it's you know, there's certainly takes a bit of bravery to do it. So, you know, I do give you big props on doing it, because it's not easy to do, but you've sort of said, this is a 10-year mission and an important one that I'm certainly going to do. So do you have any kind of words of wisdom for others who are tackling controversial subjects? They're trying to build community around sort of these, when they feel alone. Because I think a lot of authors will approach a book in similar ways that you did, which is to say, I'm writing this for me, but I know there's other me's like there. Are there things that you would urge others as they go on their own journeys?
I know your truth. I mean, I know that's an overstated maxim probably, but that's so important, because in the process of when I was writing this book, I probably felt more alone writing the book than I had felt before or after, because you get in this tunnel, right? And you're like, why am I writing this? Nobody's going to care. Who's going to read this? You know what I mean?
I've heard this before. I get a lot of messages that are about the midpoint of their manuscript with this very thing. So yes, we're all there with you.
Yeah, and it's like being sucked into this, dark tunnel or whatever when you're writing this book, or writing a book, particularly a personal one. But I think just know your truth and trust that even though the immediate surroundings may seem kind of dark or unknown, or you're feeling your way through the dark, that's just a temporary feeling, but where you're going is through that, and you will get to the other side. I would also suggest, in a practical sense, to do your best to have a support person in your life, whether it's a good friend or a partner or just someone that that will listen to that internal journey that you're having, because they say the longest journey, right, is from here to here, or sometimes just between here and here, you know, just all that going on up there. And so just having at least one person in your life that you can really share that internal journey with, and that'll help you keep your sanity in check.
I think I'm going to use that, the longest journeys from here to here, because I think it's often, or the other way around, from here to here, like this idea of like, you know what you want to say, you know it's important to you, but sometimes this crazy thing in between our ears, this critic holds us back, which is
right.
important. Well, so we always do something fun, Rachel. We always do a group photo so we can kind of remember our time with you a little bit here. So we're going to have everyone turn on cameras. And you have a very, very important job though in this one, Rachel. Your job is to help us actually figure out like what you want us to do in the photo, and whatever you tell us to do, we'll follow. So if you want us to, you know, we've had people have us blow kisses. Like a couple weeks ago, we had someone who his wife is a Viking at her college. So we did the Viking. We'll do whatever you want us to do. And then I'll take a couple photos so we have it. But you're the linchpin in all this one. You tell me what to do and I'll snap the photo for us so we have it.
Okay. Well, I would like us to, for one thing, I'm typing in my email address in the chat box because I haven't been able to read any of the chats while we're talking. So if anybody wants to email me, there it is. I hope I spelled it right. I don't have my glasses on. But we're going to make the greater than sign. So you take your left hand, and although it might be reversed on camera. So
on camera, yeah.
Because love is greater than labels. And if you go to our website, you'll notice that our logo has the greater than sign in it. And so is this right with the camera? Does that look like a greater than sign to you? Am I holding it up right?
I think so. I mean,
I think so. Okay.
As long as we're kind of all on the same pages, it'll look good. We'll tell people whatever. We can always flip it around too. We can always get creative. But I'll take a couple photos here. All right, we'll give some smiles greater than here. We all know what it means. So a couple photos here. All right, I love it. So any last words of wisdom, Rachel? We're gonna get people have already asked if they could send you copies of their books when they're done too. So we'll get you some books that you've helped us inspire as well. But any last words of wisdom for people who are, again, trying to do something important, personal, but not always easy? Any kind of words of wisdom for the crew as they're putting good in their world?
I really, really believe this. You have a flame inside of you there, and sometimes it's a flicker and sometimes it's a roaring fire. But the sooner that you learn to identify it, honor it, and act upon it, the better for you and the better for the rest of the world. So don't wait for it to become a fire. Try to start to identify that flame when it's just a flicker, and then just think of what you can accomplish. So I encourage everyone to honor their flame.
You are the best. Thank you so much. This was amazing. I appreciate you for everything. And, again, continued work on this one because it's important. Again, I think underheard voices that don't feel like they have a home need a home, no matter whether we agree or not. Everyone should feel like they have a community and a home. And I think what you're doing is important. So thank you. And we're in your stead for all your goodness here.
Thank you, Eric. And thank you, everyone.
That's great. Thank you again, Rachel. We'll let Rachel drop off here. And again, American Men, I'll put the link out so you can have it as well. Cool organization doing some great stuff. Her book is really an exceptional one as well. And for those of you that want to stick around here and chat, talk, meet some other people here, I will get you guys in groups here to let you guys hang out with one another. But again, I think it's important. She's tackled a topic that is clearly living in Texas, going to SMU, and tackling something on the other side of those around her is not easy, but I think you'll see here she's done some cool stuff and to really make it happen. So with that, I'm going to open up a couple breakout rooms to let you guys hang out together. If you got to drop off, totally understand it. Otherwise, if you want to hang out, meet some other people, now is your time, and have a great work. Remember, this is the longest distance, right? Remember that one as you're struggling here. Once we get past this one, all good things happen. So have fun. Rooms are open here, and we'll see you guys all later in the week.